Mister, is this enough to buy a dad? Alien girl showed human 3 rusty coins. The spaceport of Karan Station was never quiet. Engines roared, metal boots hit steel floors, and voices from 100 species mixed into one endless noise. Traders shouted prices, guards barked orders, and screens flashed with arrivals and departures. No one stayed still for long. If you stopped, you were pushed aside. Evan Cole had learned that years ago. He stood near his small cargo ship, a worn human freighter with faded paint and too many repair marks. He had just finished unloading medical supplies and was counting the credits on his wrist pad. It was not much, but it was enough to keep flying for another week. That was how his life worked. One job to the next, no roots, no family, just space. He was about to turn away when a soft voice reached him, almost lost in the noise. "Mister, excuse me, mister." He had learned that stopping often brought trouble, but something in the voice made him look down. A small alien girl stood in front of him. She was very small, barely reaching his waist. Her skin was a pale blue, dull instead of bright like others of her kind he had seen in the holovids. Her clothes were old and torn, clearly made from scraps. One sleeve was too long, the other too short. Her feet were bare on the cold metal floor. She held out her hand. In her palm were 3 coins. They were rusty, bent, and old, not credits, not even valid currency on any known system, just metal discs that time had almost eaten away. She looked up at Evan with wide eyes. They were dark and too serious for someone so young. "Mister," she said again, her voice shaking, "is this enough to buy a dad?" He looked at the coins, then at the girl, then back at the coins again. Buy a dad. He had heard many strange things in space. Lies, threats, promises, but never that. He crouched down slowly so he was at her level. He did not want to scare her. Humans were big compared to most species, and fear was something children learned quickly. "Hey," he said gently, "what's your name?" "Where are your parents, Lyra?" He had heard it before, just said in different words. "And who told you you could buy a dad?" he asked. Lyra looked back up at him. "The dock man," she said. "He said everything has a price, food, beds, safety. He said humans keep their children safe. I saved these." He knew those coins meant nothing. He also knew they meant everything to her. People around them began to move again. A few shook their heads. A tall insect-like alien muttered something about another orphan. A security drone hovered closer, watching but not interfering. Evan took a slow breath. "Lyra," he said carefully, "you can't buy a dad." "That's not what I meant." Sleeping in cargo holds, learning early that no one was coming to save him, learning to survive alone. He looked at the girl again, too thin, too quiet, too tired. "You choose," he finally said. "And sometimes someone chooses you back." Their armor marked them as council-enforced peacekeepers, neutral, cold, official. "This child is unregistered," one said. "Orphans of her species are not permitted to linger in commercial zones." "That is not the issue," the other replied. "She must be removed." He stood up slowly and turned to face the officers, placing himself slightly in front of her without making it obvious. "She asked me a question," he said. "I'm answering it." In that moment he knew he could walk away. Most people did. No one would blame him. The galaxy was full of children like her, but he also knew what would happen if he did. He looked back at the officers. "Maybe she is," he said. The officers paused. That was not an answer they heard often. "Claiming guardianship across species requires formal process," one said. "Medical checks, financial proof, long-term commitment. Your ship could be grounded. But I want to talk to you first. I don't want you to work." She slowly opened her hand and looked at the coins one last time. Then she held them out to him. "You can keep them," she said, "even if they are not enough." "I'll start the process," he said, "right now." A human choosing an alien child. A nobody freighter pilot claiming guardianship. It didn't make sense to the galaxy. Lyra walked beside Evan, close enough that their arms touched. She didn't say anything. She just stayed there like she was afraid he might disappear. For the first time in years, Evan felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not duty, hope. And in the middle of the loudest spaceport in the sector, with 3 rusty coins clutched in a small blue hand, a story began that the galaxy was not ready to understand. The administration wing of Karan Station was quiet compared to the spaceport. The walls were white and smooth, the lights soft but cold. Everything smelled of cleaning chemicals and metal. For Lyra, it felt like a cage. She walked close to Evan, her small hand gripping the edge of his jacket. Every few steps, she looked up at him to make sure he was still there. Evan noticed, but he did not pull away. He slowed his steps so she would not struggle to keep up. The security officers led them into a wide room filled with desks and floating screens. Several aliens of different species sat behind counters processing data. When they saw Evan and Lyra, a few heads turned. Some eyes narrowed with curiosity, others showed clear doubt. One officer spoke to a tall alien clerk with long silver skin and thin black eyes. "Human Evan Cole is requesting cross-species guardianship of an unregistered minor," the officer said. The clerk looked at Evan, then at Lyra. Her gaze lingered on the child longer than necessary. "That is highly uncommon," the clerk said, "and strongly discouraged. Strength difference alone presents risk." The clerk continued, "Temporary custody may be granted only after testing. Physical, psychological, environmental, and financial." A smaller drone floated down, projecting a soft blue light. "Begin preliminary evaluation," it said. The first test was medical. Lyra was led behind a transparent screen where a medic scanned her body. Evan was not allowed to enter, but he could see her small shape through the glass. She sat stiffly on the table, hands in her lap, eyes darting around the room. When a tool moved too fast, she flinched. Evan's jaw tightened. The medic's voice came through the speaker. "The child is malnourished, dehydrated, signs of prolonged stress." He rested a hand lightly on her shoulder, careful not to grip too hard. The next test was psychological. A soft-voiced alien asked Lyra questions while Evan waited nearby. "What is your biggest fear?" the alien asked. Lyra hesitated. She looked at Evan before answering. "Being sent away," she said quietly, "and your biggest hope." "Because she asked me a question no child should have to ask," he said finally, "and because I know what happens when no one answers. Take safer jobs. Consider her needs before your own." "You are approved for temporary guardianship," she said. "Provisional period 30 cycles. It doesn't mean you're going anywhere." "That's your home?" she asked. "For now," Evan said, "and if you want, it can be yours too." One main room, a cockpit, a small sleeping area, and a tiny food unit. Evan hesitated when he realized there was only one bed. "I'll fix that," he said quickly. "I'll make space." "Not anymore." Her breathing slowed, deep and steady. Evan watched her sleep, the way her brow relaxed, the way her fingers still clutched the edge of the blanket, even in sleep. He felt fear creep in. What if he failed? What if he wasn't enough? The next days were hard. Evan had to take safer, lower-paying jobs. Lyra had to adjust to ship gravity and human schedules. She struggled with food that tasted too strong and lights that were too bright. Sometimes she woke up crying from dreams she would not explain. Evan learned quickly. He patted the sharp edges, dimmed lights, adjusted meals. He learned her species biology late into the night, reading while she slept. People noticed. Dock workers whispered when they saw Lyra following him. Some were kind, others were not. One alien spat near Evan's feet. "You'll get tired of her," he said. "They always do." "If I'm too much trouble," she said carefully, "I can leave." "You are not a problem, you are not a cost. You are a child." She reached into a small pouch around her neck and pulled out the 3 rusty coins. "I keep them safe," she said, "so I remember." Uncaring, inside something fragile and powerful was growing, and the council was watching closely. The 30-cycle provisional period passed faster than Evan expected. Life settled into a routine, but it was not an easy one. Every day brought new challenges, some small, some heavy enough to steal his sleep. Evan learned that caring for a child was not one big decision, but thousands of small ones that never stopped. Lyra changed slowly. At first, she barely spoke to anyone except Evan. When strangers passed too close, she froze. Loud sounds made her flinch. She ate quickly, like the food might be taken away at any moment. Evan noticed everything. He adjusted their schedule so they traveled during quieter hours. He avoided crowded markets. When he worked on the ship, he let Lyra sit nearby and watch, explaining what he was doing in simple words. He wanted her to feel included, not hidden away. Some days were better than others. One morning, Evan woke to find Lyra standing in the doorway of the cockpit, holding a small metal tool. Her hands shook. "I want to help," she said. Evan smiled. "All right," he said. "You can hand me things." From that day on, she followed him during repairs, handing him tools, learning names, asking careful questions. Each small success made her stand a little taller, but the galaxy did not forget them. At the next major station, Council observers boarded Evan's ship without warning. They wore dark uniforms and cold expressions. "This is a welfare inspection," one said flatly. Lyra shrank behind Evan. They inspected everything: food storage, sleeping arrangements, environmental controls. They measured noise levels, light levels, even the temperature of the floor. "She appears attached," one observer noted, watching Lyra's grip tighten on Evan's sleeve. "Attachment is expected," another replied, "but not always healthy." Then came the question that chilled him. "If permanent guardianship is denied," the observer said, "are you prepared to surrender the child peacefully?" "Not violently. I'm here." He began working longer hours to save credits, taking extra jobs that left him exhausted. He skipped meals without noticing. His hands grew rougher, his eyes darker. Lyra noticed. One evening, she placed the 3 rusty coins on the table between them. "You're tired," she said. "I'm fine," Evan replied automatically. She pushed the coins closer. "You're scared." "Then why are they allowed to choose?" she asked. "Why don't you get to?" Her species was tall and furred, with eyes that had seen many cycles. "I've been watching you," the woman said. "That's concerning," Evan replied cautiously. She smiled faintly. "I was like her once, unwanted, passed around. I survived because one being chose me." He contacted the advocates that night. They warned him the council was already leaning toward denial. Cross-species guardianship cases rarely succeeded, especially involving humans. "You are considered unstable," one advocate told him. "Too emotional. Too dangerous." Lyra wore clean clothes Evan had saved up to buy. She clutched the pouch with her coins like a shield. They sat across from a long table of council members. "State your case," one member said to Evan. Evan stood. "I am not perfect," he said. "I'm not rich. I don't have a planet to offer her, but I have kept her safe. I have fed her. I have listened to her." The council hesitated, then nodded. Lyra stood slowly. Her legs trembled, but she did not fall. "I was alone," she said softly. "People walked past me every day. They didn't see me. He didn't own me. He chose me, and he lets me choose him too. This feels like home." "Me too." "We'll keep going," he said. "Okay." They simply stood with Evan and Lyra, one by one. The observers recorded everything. For the first time, the council looked uncertain, and somewhere deep in the cold structure of galactic law, a crack began to form. Because humans were doing what they always did when someone threatened their family, they stood their ground. The delay felt worse than a refusal. Evan and Lyra returned to the ship, but the air inside felt heavier than before. The waiting was no longer quiet hope, it was pressure. Every day felt like borrowed time, and both of them knew it. Council observers increased their presence. Drones hovered near the ship more often. Officials asked questions that had already been answered. They watched how Evan spoke to Lyra, how close he stood, how carefully he moved around her. Everything became a test. Lyra tried to be perfect. She cleaned without being asked. She spoke softly. She tried not to need too much. When Evan caught her skipping meals to save food, he sat her down and explained again that food was not something she had to earn. She nodded, but fear does not leave easily. Evan saw the change and hated himself for it. The system that claimed to protect children was teaching her to disappear again. One afternoon, while Evan was unloading cargo, a council agent arrived with a formal notice. Evan's hands shook as he read it. Mandatory relocation assessment. They wanted to move Lyra to a council-approved care center for comparison. Evan felt cold. When he returned to the ship, Lyra knew something was wrong before he said a word. "They're going to take me," she said quietly. "No," Evan said quickly. "They're asking. And I'm saying no." "They don't care what you say," she replied. She wasn't angry, just tired. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She sat awake on her bunk, clutching the pouch with the 3 rusty coins. Evan sat nearby, pretending to read, watching her from the corner of his eye. "Evan," she asked. "Yeah. If they take me," she said, "will you forget me?" The question hurt more than anything the council had done. He closed the book and moved closer. "Never," he said firmly. "You hear me? Never." She nodded, but fear still lived in her eyes. The next morning, council transport arrived. Officials entered the dock with calm authority, backed by security. This time, Evan did not step aside. "I will not consent," he said clearly. One official sighed. "You are interfering with a legal process." I am protecting my child, Evan replied. She is not legally yours, the official said. Evan stood still. She is mine in every way that matters. Lyra stood behind him, small but unmovable. Then something unexpected happened. A mechanic from the next dock shut down his tools and stepped closer. A medic paused her work. A cargo loader stopped his cart. They didn't speak. They simply stood nearby. More followed. Humans, a few aliens too, dock workers who had watched this story unfold. People who remembered being ignored once. The council officials noticed. You are obstructing operations, one warned. No one moved. Evan didn't ask for this. He didn't plan it, but he felt it solid and strong like a wall forming behind him. Council media drones arrived, capturing everything. The officials hesitated. Force would look bad, very bad. We will escalate this, one official said coldly. Prepare yourself. They left. The footage spread fast. A human freighter pilot refusing to give up an alien child. Workers standing with him. No weapons, no violence, just refusal. Across stations, people talked. Some called Evan reckless, others called him brave. Many asked the same question: why did a system with 1,000 rules fail one small child? The council called an emergency hearing. This time the chamber was full. Evan stood alone before the council, but he did not feel alone. Lyra sat behind him, legs swinging nervously. The lead counselor spoke. Your actions have disrupted multiple stations. Good, Evan said calmly. Then maybe someone will listen. You are challenging galactic authority, the counselor warned. I'm challenging indifference, Evan replied. Murmurs filled the chamber. The counselor looked at Lyra. Child, do you understand the risks of staying with a human? Lyra stood. I understand the risk of leaving him, she said. The room went quiet. He doesn't scare me, she continued. Being alone does, a counselor leaned forward. Humans are unpredictable. Yes, Lyra said simply. That's why he stopped. The words spread through the chamber like a shockwave. The council retreated to deliberate. This time they took longer. Outside, the waiting area filled. Workers, pilots, even families, not to protest but to witness. When the council returned, their faces were tight. Permanent guardianship will be granted, the lead counselor announced, under strict oversight. Lyra gasped. Evan closed his eyes, relief washing over him so hard his knees almost gave out. This case will be recorded as precedent, the counselor continued. Be aware your actions have consequences. Evan met their gaze. So do yours. They left the chamber together. Lyra walked beside Evan, her steps lighter than ever before. She reached into her pouch and pulled out the 3 rusty coins, holding them up to the light. They worked, she whispered. Evan smiled. They always did. Outside, the galaxy kept moving. Ships launched. Engines roared, but something had changed, not because of power. Not because of law, because one human refused to walk past a child, and others refused to let him stand alone. And the council knew it. This was not the end. It was the moment the galaxy began to pay attention. The ship left Karin Station slowly, like it was afraid to rush the moment. Evan sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls, though his heart still felt like it was racing. The official data pad lay on the console beside him, glowing softly. Permanent guardianship approved. The words still felt unreal. Behind him, Lyra sat in her seat, legs tucked under her, staring out at the stars. She had been quiet since they left the council chamber. Not scared, not sad, just full. When the station finally disappeared into the dark, Evan exhaled a breath he felt like he had been holding for months. It's done, he said quietly. Lyra turned to him. They can't take me anymore? No, Evan said, smiling. They can't. She nodded once like she was locking the truth into place. Then she did something small but powerful. She leaned her head against his arm. Evan froze for half a second, then relaxed. He let himself feel it. The warmth. The trust. For the first time, the ship didn't feel empty. Life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became real. Evan chose safer routes, not because he was forced to, but because he wanted to. He found steady work delivering supplies between core-adjacent stations. Lyra began learning basic trade math, star maps, and languages through simple programs Evan downloaded for her. She laughed more. At first, it surprised him. The sound was light, almost unsure, like she was testing it. But soon, laughter became part of the ship's normal sounds, right alongside the hum of the engines. Lyra started asking questions, endless questions. Why are stars different colors? That last one always made Evan pause. Because someone should, he finally answered one night. She thought about that for a long time. At the next station, something strange happened. People recognized them. A human dock worker waved. An alien merchant offered Lyra a small piece of fruit for free. A medic knelt to her level and asked how she was sleeping. Lyra stayed close to Evan, but she watched everything with wide eyes. "They see me," she whispered. "Yes," Evan said. "They do." News of the case had spread farther than either of them knew. Not as a protest story, not as a fight, as a question. Why did one human care when the system did? On a quiet station near the inner routes, an official request arrived. The council wanted Evan to speak. Not to be judged, to explain, Evan almost refused. He didn't like crowds, he didn't like being watched. But Lyra looked at him and said, "If you don't tell them, they'll forget." So he agreed. The chamber was smaller this time, no threats, no guards standing too close. Evan stood and spoke simply. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I didn't save the galaxy, I didn't change the law by force." He looked around the room. "I just answered a child when she asked a question." Some council members shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't need food first," Evan continued. "She needed to know she mattered." When he finished, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. After that, things began to change slowly. Not laws, not systems, people. Other guardianship requests appeared, some humans, some aliens. Some mixed. Council workers started looking twice at orphan files instead of pushing them aside. It wasn't a revolution, it was a crack. Years passed. Lyra grew taller, stronger. Her skin grew brighter with good food and safe sleep. She learned human expressions and alien customs. She learned how to argue politely and how to stand her ground. She kept the 3 rusty coins in a small metal box under her bed. One day, Evan asked her why she still kept them. She smiled. "So I remember who I was," she said. "And who you were." Evan's hair began to show gray. His ship gained more patches and fewer dents. It became known on several routes as a safe ship, a kind ship, a home. On Lyra's 7th birthday since leaving Karin Station, Evan tried to make a proper celebration. He decorated the main cabin with cheap lights and cooked a meal that only slightly burned. Lyra watched him move around, pretending not to notice the effort. When it was time for gifts, she handed him a small box. "What's this?" Evan asked. "Open it," she said. Inside were the 3 rusty coins. Evan looked up, startled. "Lyra, these are yours." She shook her head. "They did their job," she said. "Now they're ours." His vision blurred. He closed the box gently and pulled her into a careful hug. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly, bright and silent. Somewhere out there, children were still alone. Systems were still slow. Councils were still cautious. But the galaxy had learned something it couldn't unlearn. That humanity's greatest strength was not its ships or its weapons or its survival on harsh worlds. It was the ability to stop, to kneel, to listen, and to choose love when no one demanded it. And all of it had started with a small alien girl, 3 rusty coins, and a simple question that changed 2 lives, and quietly a galaxy.